now we are back from break. I'm David Bowles here, streaming live with you today on Bowles.tv. BOLES.TV. Streaming live with you every weekday morning at 9 a.m. And at 11 a.m. on the weekends, Jana Marie is here. And she provides wonderful chat and conversation in her show, Ask a Deaf Person, where she talks about American Sign Language and disability and worker rights and job placement and any kind of thing you want to know or need to know. You can show up and chat and ask her. You can also email her, Jana at Bowles.tv. And you can also ask me via email, David at Bowles.tv. Well, this cancel culture thing is our next topic. I think the whole thing is really fascinating and really unfortunate. And it's all bound together in Me Too and You Too and Who's Too. And some people, I guess, deserve to be canceled, and other people, I'm not so sure. But this is really not a new thing, as we're going to discover. At the start of the 20th century, ethnic minorities objected to the way they were being portrayed on stage in entertainment. Does comedy, the idea that we're discussing, does comedy rely on discrimination and making fun of certain people? And I'm old, in my 50s, and I remember the Pollock joke, the gay joke, and you tell them and people would laugh. I wouldn't tell them, but other people would tell them and laugh. It was a big thing. There were books you could buy about joking, making fun of ethnic people. And that's how you kind of keep them down, as you make fun of them. You make them the butt of the joke. Instead of airing grievances on the not yet to be invented internet, many delivered their objections in person. Irish and Italian immigrants were vocal at the turn of the century. Vaudeville comic Walter Kelly received a letter threatening his life if he did not immediately cut out several Italian stories in his act. An Irish betterment organization called the Clan na Gael pelted comedians with eggs for perceived slights against the Irish. And that, to me, is the right way to stand up. You make your objections known to people who are discriminating against you and tell them to stop. I remember Johnny Carson in the 70s. Would put on a lisp and tell jokes about gay people. And the gay person's name that he would always use was Bruce. B-R-U-C-E, Bruce. And that happened to be my father's name. Now, I don't know my father. I have no relationship with him, but I felt bad for him that, you know, in America, if you were named Bruce, at that time in Johnny Carson's reign as the king of comedy, the suggestion was that you were gay because of your name. And Wayne Newton. You remember Wayne Newton? If you're young, you probably don't know him, but look him up on the internet. He was a big, talented singer, has a very high voice. He was a young pop star in the 50s and 60s, a little overweight, and now he's older, big star in Las Vegas. And Johnny Carson would regularly make fun of Wayne Newton for being, without saying it suggestively, that he was faggy or gay or fey or effeminate. Foppish, I think, is the term. And people in the audience would laugh, and Johnny would laugh, and instead of Bruce being the butt of the gay jokes from Johnny Carson, it was Wayne Newton became the butt of the insinuated gay joke against Wayne Newton. And Wayne Newton is very talented, plays every musical instrument you could ever imagine, and he's also a martial arts master, well trained. And he does it sort of like Elvis on stage, but better than Elvis, because he was actually trained. And one day, Wayne Newton was on the set, NBC, in the area, said, "Where's Johnny Carson?" And he went in to see him, and they said, "You can't see Mr. Carson." And he said, "I'm going to go see him." And he barged into Johnny Carson's office, and Johnny Carson's like, "Meh." And Wayne Newton says, "Look, I want you to stop making fun of me and saying that I'm gay. And there's nothing wrong with gay people, but I'm not gay, and you're suggesting to your audience of millions of people every night that I'm gay. And I want you to knock it off. And if you don't knock it off, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to beat you up." And then he pounded his fist on his desk as hard as he could, and the whole thing rattled and shook. And Johnny Carson said, "Okay, I won't do it again." And Wayne Newton said, "Thank you," and left. And Johnny Carson, from that point on, did not make fun of Bruce or Wayne Newton again. So that's what it takes. Somebody thinks they're funny, they're making a joke at your expense. Are you going to sit there and be the butt of the joke? Or are you going to stand up and fight back and say, "No, I'm not doing that. You're not doing that anymore. And if you won't stop, then I'm going to have to stop you." A newspaper editorial in Kansas feared this would inspire other groups to do the same. If the well-known and almost indispensable Irish policeman is to be abolished from the stage by decree of Clan na Gael, what is to hinder the Afro-American societies from then following suit and threatening dire consequences on the heads of players who represent the stage type of Negro, unquote. There's Jana Marie. And there was a time in America when blackface was a thing, right? Where white performers would go out, put black stuff on their face, and take, some people said it was shoe polish, and take white makeup and put it around their mouths, around their eyes, and they pretend to be funny black people. The singer Al Jolson had a whole show that he would do in blackface. And then later, 20, 30 years later, Ted Danson tried to do the same thing in blackface. Look it up. Ted Danson in blackface. And his girlfriend at the time was Whoopi Goldberg. And she said, "Oh, I thought it was funny," trying to defend him. And nobody else did. And Ted Danson doesn't want to talk about that anymore. But the fact is that he did it. You go. Ted Danson in blackface. And I guess he thought because his girlfriend was Whoopi Goldberg that he could get away with it, that people would think it's funny. Nobody thought it was funny. It really blew up in his blackface, so to say. So, that's precisely what happened. These African Americans, these Native Americans, and American Jews all staged protests in the early 20th century. In 1903, the Topeka Capitol predicted the death of comedy. The final upshot of protests is to strip comedy of its most engaging and popular features, making fun of people. If the rage should extend to all sorts of people caricatured in the theater and in print, well then goodbye to comedy. That's the threat. And indeed, jokes concerning politics, religion, and sex were taboo for most of the century. Even the most casual, carnal reference could result in arrest. The legendary Mae West wrote a number of popular stage comedies, And for her efforts, she was convicted of obscenity in 1927 and sentenced to 10 days in a prison workhouse. And those obscenity laws that were used to prosecute Mae West and later Lenny Bruce were found unconstitutional in the 1960s, chipped away by the courts under free speech. Freedom of expression flourished as obscenity laws were overturned at the start of the 1970s. But the police department didn't always like what the courts said. Blazing Saddles, a Mel Brooks film released in 1974, was co-written by Richard Pryor, black comedian. While it was playing in theaters, Richard Pryor was arrested in Richmond, Virginia for using the same language on stage that you could hear in the movie Blazing Saddles. His manager was told a warrant had been issued for disorderly conduct. Pryor turned himself in and was released after posting a $500 bond. In that same decade, Sears pulled its sponsorship of Three's Company due to religious pressure. Three's Company was a television sitcom starring John Ritter, Joyce DeWitt, and Suzanne Summers. And they were all roommates, and they were pretending that the John Ritter character was gay so they could all live together. It seems quaint now, but back then that was a big thing. And he would act gay to throw off their landlord and their super who would throw him out otherwise. George Carlin was arrested after cursing. Welcome Back, Kotter was banned in Boston over fears it would trigger disorder because of caricatures on the show. In the 1980s, comedy team Bowery and Wilson were arrested for fart humor. In the 1990s, Andrew Dice Clay canceled a show fearing he'd be arrested on obscenity charges in Texas. All of this occurred long before the words and phrases millennial and safe space and retweet and triggering came along. So people get scared, and now people are saying, oh, well, people are standing up for themselves, so now we can't say anything about anybody, we're going to be in trouble. Bill Cosby very famously said, oh, these young comedians work blue, meaning they tell off-color jokes, sexual jokes, which was kind of funny, that he was setting himself up as the arbiter of what was funny or not, or acceptable or not when it comes to sexuality. And then you have comedians like Jay Leno, who are right down the middle, who are very funny, and dare I say safe, because they're just generally funny, observational humor. They're not picking on a specific minority or people. Jay Leno doesn't really have to censor himself because he's not blue. He doesn't make off-color jokes. But this cancel culture that we live in now causes people to rethink what they're going to share. If you've just met someone, 49% of people are very careful what they say. In the workplace, 40% of people are very careful what they say. They can't be themselves and express themselves because they're scared of being canceled. On social media, 34% are careful. When they're with friends, 31% careful. And when you're with family, 21% are careful of what they say. The family thing I don't think is bad, because families are usually made up of very diverse people. Conservatives on one side and liberals on the other, and usually it's age-related. Then Terry Gilliam is a big superstar director, and he was hoping to direct Into the Woods at the Old Vic. And he had made some comments in the news that got him in big trouble. Gilliam had previously described the Me Too movement as a witch hunt, adding there were many decent people who were getting hammered as the industry grappled with sexual abuse. Now, there's truth in that. There is truth in the Me Too movement, and there is exaggeration in the Me Too movement. We know that. Several allegations were made against the Old Vic's former artistic director, Kevin Spacey, as part of the Me Too movement, which began in 2017. Well, last year, Terry Gilliam told the Independent newspaper he was tired of white men being blamed for everything wrong in the world. Well, right there, you're going to be in big trouble. It may be true, but you really can't say it out loud, because you're going to get smacked in the face. In the same interview, he said, "When I announce that I'm a black lesbian in transition, people take offense of that. Why?" Okay, so Terry Gilliam is old and maybe not self-aware and maybe not paying attention to the world around him. And I don't think you can say that kind of thing today and get away with it without people standing up and saying, "Wait a minute, what do you mean? Are you trying to be funny, or are you just trying to be a jerk?" And Terry Gilliam also recently defended comedian Dave Chappelle, whose most recent comedy special included comments deemed by some to be transphobic. After some younger Old Vic, name of the theater, was going to do Into the Woods, directed by Terry Gilliam. After some younger Old Vic staffers reportedly raised concerns about hosting Gilliam's production, it's understood the theater's management held meetings with producers in the spring, and Terry Gilliam was out. Now they're doing the show somewhere else, but Terry Gilliam was canceled. His show was canceled. J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, author, she's in trouble too. "If sex isn't real," she wrote on Twitter, "there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth." Well, she got in a lot of trouble for that. The idea that women like me, J.K. Rowling wrote, who've been empathetic trans people for decades, feeling kinship because they're vulnerable in the same way as women, i.e. male violence, hate trans people because they think sex is real and has lived consequences, is nonsense. I respect every trans person's right to live in a way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. I'd march with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it's hateful to say so. Well, people did not really agree with J.K. Rowling. They went after her because she was pretty much saying, look, there are two sexes, male and female, and you're born one of them, and that's the way it goes. And she's been paying for it ever since. And she has a long blog post explaining her position, and people are saying, no, what you're saying is not right. And just because, you got out of a bad marriage and you were sexually abused doesn't give you the right to contextualize our experience based on your experience. One of the most interesting recent condemnations of insensitivity in comedy is Kathy Griffin. When Trump was elected, Kathy Griffin took this photograph with a Trump head, a bloody head, and holding it up. A beheaded likeness of Donald Trump. And it got her under a lot of trouble. And she made one big mistake in doing this. And the mistake was not in doing it, because she was being funny and she was making a statement, and you either laughed or you didn't laugh. You either liked it or you didn't like it. Take it or leave it. It's your decision. We live in a free world. The fatal mistake she made is that she apologized. If you are a comedian and you have a reputation for being raunchy and aggressive and irritating, and you have based your entire career on being that way, you cannot suddenly transform yourself into a weak and middling person who's full of apologies. And I understand why she felt she had to apologize, because she was being threatened with her life. People were after her. And the real Kathy Griffin that we know and loved and respected would have said, look, get over it, leave me alone. But she didn't. She crumbled. She changed. She went back. And her adversaries jumped at the opportunity to kill her and to go after her even more, because she presented herself as being weak and vulnerable and susceptible to pressure. And there was no amount of apologizing she could do that would satisfy these radicals on the other side of her attempt at comedy. And Donald Trump came after her and said, you made Barron, my son, cry. He saw that picture of me with the bloody face and thought it was me. And what are you going to say to that? Lying or not, what are you going to say to that? You give them the high road. Not by what you did, but by what you did after. By backing down and saying, oh, I didn't mean that. And what Kathy Griffin didn't realize is this image is not going away. It's all over the internet. You search Kathy Griffin, bloody Donald Trump head. You're going to see image after image after image of this. So you can't take it back. You can't apologize for it. You did it. You done it. So just own it and say, I thought it was funny at the time. And leave it at that. Let them condemn you all you want, but don't back down from what you thought was the right thing to do. Because this wasn't spontaneous. This was not of the moment. This was not an utterance of the mouth that can be retraced and retracted. This was planned. You had a very nice blue shirt on. You had your hair combed. The bloody head of Donald Trump was prepared for you, and you held it out. This was planned and purposeful, Kathy. Following intense online backlash, Kathy Griffin apologized for the images, despite initially defending them. I sincerely apologize, she said in a video on Twitter. I went way too far. The image is just too disturbing. I understand how it offends people. It wasn't funny, I get it. She added, begging for everyone's forgiveness, that she will ask the photographer to take down the image. Well, how did that work out for you, Kathy? Is the image down? Thank you for the follow. How did that work out? Telling the photographer to take down the image. Didn't work out so great. And of course, by backing down and showing weakness and what am I going to do with myself? Well, CNN fired her from the New Year's show that she had done for many years with Anderson Cooper. Anderson Cooper did not support Kathy Griffin, wrote her off, said he was outraged and insulted, did not stand with her at all. He was a coward. Anderson Cooper is a coward. He could have stood with his friend of many years and said, I love and respect Kathy. In this instance, I didn't think it was very funny. But I respect her right to not be funny. Leave it at that. You don't have to condemn her. You don't have to make a public statement that makes you look good, Anderson. So Kathy didn't work for a long time. People canceled her shows. Finally, I think she went to some foreign countries and started touring a little bit and making a little bit of money. But it's a very important lesson, especially if you're trying to be funny in cancel culture. Because people will cancel you as quickly as they can and try to shut you up and tamp you down. And you can fight back and you can win or you can lose. But as long as you're being true to yourself, I think you're going to be okay. And I don't think down deep that Kathy Griffin thinks she did anything wrong with this. I think she was making a political statement that wasn't necessarily hilariously funny. But there are people who respect her for standing up against what turned out to be a terrible president. But she gave him the higher road of being insulted and wounded and bringing in his child and the First Lady condemning her and everyone condemning her and threatening her life. And what did you get out of that apology, Kathy Griffin? You got absolutely nothing. You did not win the day. And on that note, we're taking our final blood pressure break of the day. I will see you momentarily.